Welcome back to another edition of the Founder Spotlight. Today I have Sierra Homer and Lewie from Flyers Cocktail Company. How are you guys doing today?
Good, mate. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Lewie, you founded the Flow Agency in 2015, and you were working closely with several major beverage brands on their marketing and different innovation strategies. What inspired you to make that transition from consulting for those brands to creating your own beverage company with Flyers?
Yeah, we had some really fun experiences working with a lot of their innovation teams, helping them come up with beverage concepts and helping them bring it to market. And we ultimately learned and even kind of helped advise on, helping them understand why innovation fails within big companies. And that was actually a project that we did with one of them. And, we knew that if these big companies are, have an inability to innovate, particularly from scratch, going from 0 to 1, right? They're pretty good at taking something and scaling it. They're not very good at creating something from zero, because they prioritize the commercial viability of day one, and they don't really like to defend the brand from being devalued within their organization. Through COVID, a lot of those budgets dried up, and we thought, okay, instead of us building these brands for these companies, how about we do it for ourselves and use the supply chain and the network that we've built over the last couple of years to create our own version of it to service this non-alcoholic occasion and macro trend.
Yeah, and so through Flow Agency as well as Safari Sundays, you consulted with big brands like PepsiCo, Anheuser-Busch, Heineken, Constellation, and all of their innovation strategies. What insights did you gain from working with those established players that influenced your approach and creating Flyers ultimately?
Yeah, so we knew that those innovation projects that we worked on within Big Beverage, they were exciting projects and well-funded, but they fell down on a couple of points. And that was, one of them was the one I just mentioned where they prioritize commercial viability. So they have to make these products for I'm making up for 10 cents a can from day one. And they're really looking to have, be at efficient margins out the gate, which means they kind of select maybe lower quality ingredients, and they really have to have a legitimate business model out the gate versus creating a really high quality version of a product and prioritizing that and getting product market fit, and then moving into scale and optimizing your costs and margins. So that was one piece of the puzzle where we're like, okay, all the work that we put into building these brands and these innovation concepts gets diluted quite a bit out the gate, which was a little bit disappointing. And so from that, we knew, okay, if we were to create something, how do we create it in a way where there isn't any of that dilution? How to create the best version of this non-alcoholic concept that we can and bring it to market? And that's when we hit up, Ivy Mix from day one and did 70 rounds of flavor work with her.
Yeah, so during research for all this, I listened to a few different podcasts and read some transcripts, things like that. Several times it's been mentioned that, like you just mentioned as well, that big beverage companies prioritize that commercial viability over quality. So how did Flyers approach that differently? I mean, particularly when you guys went through the 70 plus rounds of flavor development with Ivy Mix, just like you said.
Yeah, I think some of the insights that we had from working with bigger companies was that customers still wanted sophisticated flavors, but they also wanted. And so when we were kind of going through with Ivy on the 70 rounds, we wanted to create the best bar beverages and cocktails that we had, and how do we get that from going to her bar and she's mixing everything and lighting things on fire and doing all these rounds of getting the 3 cocktail flavors that we wanted. And then how do we then translate that into formulation that we would put in a can? And so we wanted to spend the time with her and go out to the formula house as well, write down the recipes, and just sit and go through iteration until we could get it as close as we could without losing the nuance. Because it's really easy to kind of, I think, go into big production and lose a lot of the nuanced and complicated flavors. And so how can we do our formulas for that? And so we have, a bunch of different flavors that are in, and then we've kind of been able to linearize them into one flavor with our flavor house. That's kind of like our secret recipe, which has allowed us to then take that and scale it into cans. And so I think that was really important for us. With every formula and iteration we do, we always bring Ivy back with us. We always start at her bar with juices and fruits and making the fresh cocktail version of it.
Now, either one of you, Sierra or Lewie, did you guys have the flavors that you wanted to go to market with already in your mind, or was that part of that 70 plus flavor process, and you could decide on the 3 best?
Yeah, so it started with a lot of insights work, and we'd already done a lot of this, from our previous lives working on the agency side with Big Beverage. So we knew about what the current and future trends were because we were the group that helped kind of illuminate those for these companies. And so we took a lot of that knowledge and also a massive amount of research to look at okay, what are the top categories in terms of flavor spaces right now and in the future? And then also, quite simply, what are the top 10 cocktail flavors? And then who are the types of people, like demographic, geographic, psychographic variables that consume those cocktails on what occasions? So we layered all that together and started out with 3 cocktails out the gate that have a bit of a different target market. So we have our old fashioned, which is a little bit more male forward, a little bit more winter, a little bit more evening orientated. We have our Aperol Spritz, which is a little bit more female forward, a little bit more summertime occasion. Then we have the margarita, which is an all-time favorite. So those 3 kind of are different enough from each other to target different consumers. And we have found that people try all 3 of them, pick the one that they like, and then double down on that one. And that was intentional, right? Those 3 were designed in a way to be very different from each other, and that we knew that someone's going to love one of them. And so that's what started the first 3. So we had these flavor spaces, and then we took that to Ivy, to her bar. We said, okay, these are the spaces, let's create our own version of it with you, and then scale it into commercial production.
Gotcha. I love that. Now, Sierra, CBD hemp beverage space, obviously, as we were talking offline, comes with quite a bit of different challenges from banking restrictions as well as marketing limitations, what you're allowed to say and things like that. How has Flyers been able to navigate those obstacles while still achieving, pretty outstanding growth? I think it's like 280% revenue growth over the past year.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just being able to be nimble and adapt to changes, because you can try to predict what markets are going to stay open, what new markets are going to come online, and then a situation like California, where essentially so quickly we're trying to figure out and still trying to figure out how to get our product back to the stores. So I think the biggest thing is just having a nimble team and being able to react and move quickly. I think that's the benefit that a company like us that's a bit smaller is going to have against these bigger players. If they eventually come in, they just can't turn the ship as fast as we can. And then building your systems and processes in a way that kind of allows for changes and allows you to build support around everything you do, whether it's who could be the best banking partner, and can you find someone like, I've moved to First Citizens Bank, who's kind of taking a bet on, and working with hemp companies and finding those hemp-friendly companies that see the growth of the industry and want to be a part of it. We found some just great manufacturing partners, some great ingredient suppliers that have kind of seen the growth and what the future growth is going to be, and been like, hey, we want to work with y'all because we see what the future of beverage is going. And so I think it's always finding, the right partners, being nimble, and just kind of letting a lot of it roll off your back, because it's really easy to get frustrated and get down, but just to kind of keep going and saying, California's closed, but look at what Texas can be, and let's just take the process that we were starting to build in California and move that there, and just continue to build the machine, and kind of getting that process that we can apply to new markets or new situations that allows us to grow.
Yeah, and so I'm always interested in how companies are built from a talent perspective. How big is Flyers from a headcount perspective, and are you guys taking the approach of building out like an internal team, or do you guys work with a lot of outside vendors, whether that be agencies or freelancers and things like that? And thirdly, is that approach based around finances, or is there an optimal way that you're going about doing that?
Yeah. So we're about 10 of us at the moment, and then we have some contractors and agencies on top of that. The way we approach the contractors and agencies is kind of do like a trial period where you effectively kind of date each other, and you're like, is this right for us? Is it right for them? And just kind of do a short 3 to 6 month, or even less experience where you can say, okay, let's have a clear set of scope, and did we perform against the scope, and is everybody happy, and then look at taking that to the next step. And I think we kind of do the same thing with approach with new team members as well. We want to make sure that they're happy with us and working with Flyers, and that we're happy with them, and that we continue to create this deeper relationship over time. So a lot of times we might work with a contractor or a 1099 and then transition into a full-time role with scale. And so the strategy for us is to continue to build out our sales team, because we know feet on the street will help drive and support our distributors and store retail velocity, and then also continue to scale our e-com side of the business as well. We have that a 50-50 split between wholesale and DTC. So kind of like 2 parts of the business, one helps feed the other in terms of brand scale and cash flow, and ultimately we'll continue to scale into more retail stores and open up new states through 2025.
Gotcha. How many states are you guys in currently?
10 states at the moment.
Gotcha. That's cool. And then how many do you plan to be on, assuming regulations allow, by the end of 2025?
Well, we got 5 more in the pipeline. We're just trying to pump the brakes a little bit and just go deeper instead of wider, be a little bit more selective about the partners that we work with, which is a luxury, because a year and a half ago, it was hard to find distributors that would enter the space. And so, but we know that there will be up to about 20 states by the end of the year.
And with your background working with all those big brands, I know it was mostly on the marketing and innovation side of things. Were you able to parlay some of those relationships that you built with those companies from a distributor standpoint as you launch flyers?
Yeah, a little bit. I think a lot of that history and that experience does carry a little bit of weight, particularly when you can have the conversations that you can to say, hey, we work with these different groups in these spaces and helping on that side of things. So they know, they're aware about the amount of effort that we put into building the best product that we can, and also therefore also the best brand that we can on top of it. And so, I certainly layer that in, and if definitely leveraging the network as much as I can to capitalize on it.
Absolutely. So again, doing some research here, you've mentioned that a few different times, when you go out to a restaurant today, vegetarian options or vegan options aren't necessarily put in its own separate category on menus anymore as they used to be. They're integrated throughout the menu in a more holistic approach. How do you see that parallel playing out with cannabis beverages in bars and restaurants? And what role is Flyers going to play in that evolution?
Yeah. So there was a scenario in the past where you had a menu at a restaurant and you just had the meat options, then you might have a separate seafood menu and a separate vegetarian or a separate vegan menu.
Yep.
Now when you go, all of the food is just together on the menu and everybody's eating. And so this is the future that we envisage for beverages in terms of on-premise, where right now there is alcoholic menu, then there's usually this little off the side non-alc menu that's questionable and a second thought.
Yes.
But we know that there's this future of beverages is low alcoholic, non-alcoholic, THC, CBD, eventually there'll be psychedelic beverages as well, or psilocybin, there's kava, there's all these different categories. And we anticipate, a beverage menu to be there with all these different types of products on one menu, similar to where the food menus move to, instead of having an alcoholic menu and then a separate little non-alc menu on the side. So we're trying to work with bars and restaurants to help build that and say, hey, this is a margarita. It's a complex, sophisticated margarita worthy of being on this menu, but it's THC instead of alcohol. That's the difference. Yep. And so we don't want to have some separate menu on the side that's part of it. We want it to be integrated properly and have everybody drinking. And you might be having, a mushroom drink, and I might be having a cannabis drink, and Sierra might be having a non-alc or a low-proof beverage. But we're all there, we're all socializing, we're all drinking something during that alcohol occasion. So that's the future that we envisage and what we're trying to build by bringing the highest quality product we can to the bar.
Yeah, it's a big frustration for me when I go out. So I don't drink anymore. It wasn't anything negative. It's just I started drinking a lot of these THC drinks, and after 3 months, I realized I hadn't had any alcohol and I didn't miss it. So I was I go back. But my point is, when I go out, and a lot of times they don't even have the non-alcoholic beer on the menu at all, and I have to ask. And they might have 2 or 3 options, but none of them are on the menu because they don't want to reprint the menus, or they do have it, it's not on the menu, and it's definitely going to be a Heineken Zero, almost always.
Yeah. Or it's Coke or orange juice or Red Bull, and that's it. Really?
Yeah, I love when they have the non-alcoholic menu and it is Coke and juice. I'm well, yeah, obviously those are non-alcoholic.
Yeah.
So Sierra, well, both of you, but it's been almost a year now since you guys closed your seed round with Delta Emerald Ventures. How, when you had your initial plan of what you were going to use those funds for, scaling production, expanding the sales team, how has those original plans aligned with the actual, process over the last, I believe it's 10 or 11 months now?
Yeah, I can start with the production side. We've been scaling production. We are started working with a new manufacturing partner who is getting more lines and more specific to cannabis beverage space, which is awesome. The facility, which has just been really nice, kind of close nearby. We kind of wanted to solidify all of our different partners, whether it be sleeves, cans, manufacturing, kind of try to localize most of our volume in one area. So it just becomes easier. Home deliveries, warehousing. We've opened up 2 new DTC facilities so we can start getting more shipping. And so the scaling production has gone well. We've also worked up to level up with those custom flavors I was mentioning. We can now order them at much bigger volumes because our production is bigger, and so we're starting to kind of see the results of being able to scale that also with our COGS. Last year we were able to do price decrease to wholesale. We're hoping to be able to do that again and becoming more competitive on the shelf. And so we're still building, production scaling and getting into more of consistent cadence with production as these markets, we're starting to level out to these new markets with knowing our demand. Forecast is on both DTC side and wholesale. So getting into more monthly cadence on that. And then we have the option to even open up another DTC facility, depending on the geographic location of where our ordering goes. So still growing, still scaling, still fortifying.
Yeah.
And then the same on the sales side. We have our national sales manager based out of Nashville, and then a few different market managers around. And we're kind of looking at, is it chicken or egg when it comes to turning on a new state? Like, do you build a market into a point to justify a sales rep, or do you plan to sales rep there first and help it build it to the point where it's justified? And we ultimately have both approaches based on the market. Sometimes, we have really, really good distribution partners that we work closely with. We work with a lot of the chains, and we obviously try and leverage those relationships to drive velocity, particularly in markets that don't have a physical presence in. But then we complement that with like market blitzes and market visits. So I'll pop into a market for 3 or 4 days and do ride-alongs with some of the reps. And it's the best way to learn. You're just at the front lines. You're chatting with the store owners, and you're selling the dream. We talk about it like category vision. We're selling the category to these store owners. Yep. And Flyers is part of that, right? And I think that's this rising tide raises all ships, and I think everybody in the category is doing a really good job about that, of selling the concept of hemp THC beverages and why it's here to stay.
Yeah. And I always like to end these conversations with the same question is, besides your own product, besides Flyers, what other brands are either you consuming or inspire you as you can?
Yeah. I really love, like on the alcohol side, Madre are a really, really cool brand, and the cannabis side, Old Pal. I think they both do a really good job to like build a lot of brand depth in their portfolio and all their consumer touch points. And then, there's a brand that I really enjoy, an Australian guy, another friend of mine that run it called Vacation. They're doing an incredible job. They've just launched like dozens and dozens of SKUs. They've partnered with a Full Suite FM. They've got a lot of exposure, some really great PR, and they're scaling rapidly. And they are just doing a branding masterclass in the CPG space. And it's really impressive to see kind of how they bring it to life. So I love all those three. That's in the non-beverage side. Then on the beverage side, I think there's one of the first brands that was out there was Canned Social Tonics, and I think they're doing a great job to help educate people, particularly with their low-dose options, and scaling nationally, and they've got a really good job on brand. And then I think Breeze are doing a really good job on the DTC side of things, helping educate and bringing brand awareness to the category, and they're moving that more into wholesale now as well. And there's a few other national players. We know there's some, there's groups like Cycling Frog that are doing a really good job scaling and helping them with like consistent quality products in the market. And so, I think that there's probably about like 5 or 6 like large groups in the hemp THC space that are really helping like build and grow and educate. And then I always like to like take cues from brands in the CPG space to learn like what they're doing and like how that can be applied to what we're doing.
Sorry, a brand that I take a lot from in terms of like how we can build, I think, community and try to build more of a community around Flyers and how we do our subscription model is a really small running group called Bandit Running based out here in Greenpoint. And I just think they've done a good job at growing community online through partnerships and really just building a really strong following around their brand. So I try to like take points of things they send when you order stuff and just how they really make me feel like special as a customer. And I'm like, how can I translate that into Flyers? And then within the THC space, I've always loved what Artet has done, creating like high quality products and kind of built the cocktail experience as well. Yep. And so I've always admired them from the early cannabis days of when the hemp beverage space was around. So those are 2 brands I always look at.
And they're delicious too.
Yeah. So I have very similar inclinations as you guys. Another one that I always love, since you mentioned running, Sierra, is Off Field. I really enjoyed, especially their Instagram around like the running side of things. I'm a big runner myself, so I really enjoy that. The 2 big like cocktail brands besides you guys that I actually haven't tried either one of them yet, but I just love their branding is Artet, just like you said, Sarah, and then I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Pamos or Pamos. I really like their branding a lot. I saw someone post, here's a shameless plug for a subreddit that I moderate. Someone posted on the R Drink Cannabis subreddit their like reserve bottle, and so it's like a nice black and orange bottle. It's a very sexy bottle, so I really like that. As well.
They've
done
such an amazing job helping like build quality products and bring them to the market and scale it, and really appreciate when a brand puts a lot of thought and effort into like the design, the liquid, and their go-to-market strategy, because it really helps lift everybody. And they're the kind of groups that we want to be with in both the retailer and with the distributor, because you really get to put your best foot forward, and I think they're doing a really great job of that.
Yeah, and speaking of branding here, is you guys had a pretty major like rebrand, didn't you? Was that earlier in 2024 or was that late 2023?
Yeah, well, it took a year, but we launched it. Q3 2024. Yeah, we come, a lot of that innovation work, we also did a lot of brand work. So, we definitely over-indexed on brand, and we spent a year kind of like iterating on the concept of the brand, our positioning, and also packaging and future-proofing the product line. So we wanted to kind of bring it all a little bit more in line, a little bit more, make it more bold and more cohesive, lean into that nostalgic cocktail culture, and really create something people will have the ability to trust, like this familiar format and a familiar looking brand, but still be relatively bold on shelf, have that nice billboard effect when all the SKUs are against each other, build a system that accounts for additional SKUs and flavors and products we will launch in the future, and then bring that to life on as many elements as we can, and all the different touch points, both on e-com and in wholesale and point of sale material. So we basically just started with, the can design and then the branding, and then just kind of like layered in everything else, and then finally got it out there. And it took us 6 months to move through a lot of the old product, and I think there's probably still some out there in the market.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times in this space, because we're going to start being in places where you can get alcohol and they're next to each other, which is awesome. But I want to make sure that the packaging is really clear what we are, because the last thing you need is someone picking up a can, picking up a bottle and saying, not realizing what it is, and then there be a negative experience that we don't want to have. And so I think, the labeling, just being really clear that this is THC, it's 2 milligrams, what does that mean? Also helps everyone in the industry. And so I think that was important for us too, was just making sure everything was super clear and easy to digest.
Well, thank you guys so much for your time today, and I look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you, mate.
Cheers.
We appreciate it. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.